And when you finish with that, I suppose you're gonna fly, huh?
Hey guys, welcome to the Rugby Bricks podcast. My name is Peter Breen, founder and host of Rugby Bricks. Today's guest is Chloe Dalton. Now, Chloe won a gold medal over in Rio with the Australian Women's Sevens side. She's an absolute workhorse for that team. She gets through all that grunt work, making big tackles and just a real engine for that Australian Women's Sevens side. Now, winning a gold medal is never easy. There's not many people that have done it, especially in team sports. So I really wanted to go deep with her on how they managed to all get on the same page to achieve that goal. We speak from about sort of 24, 12 months and then up to 3 months out from Rio. What was it looking like? Team meetings, team cultures, what they did to continue to grow, and also how they trained at that really high level and what the Australian Women's Sevens side did to become the best team in the world and win that gold medal. Currently, Chloe is playing AFLW for a club called Carlton here in Melbourne. Now, Aussie rules, for those that don't know, it's played on a massive cricket field. They run around like crazy. They've got a different style of ball, which is fully leather and smooth that they kick around. Such an incredible game to watch, sideways, back and forth, marks, and the works, and just a really cool sport to watch once you get into it. And I've loved since moving to Melbourne, watching it, going along to the MCG with 90,000 people and watching all these guys and girls run around like crazy. It's awesome. So it's been good for me to learn that style of kicking, how they do things, why they do things, and get some knowledge from Chloe with that, and then again how it relates back to her rugby sevens. That's the reason why me and Chloe are working together. So with that, she's obviously still keen to keep going with the sevens and rugby sevens, and also just keep their skills on top of things alongside her footy season. So I'm helping out with her tackle stuff and a little bit of ruck work, her passing and her drop kicks, just keeping up to speed with that. Such a professional person and someone who I've really enjoyed working with. It's easy to turn up for these sessions because she's so positive, so ready, and so keen to learn. Chloe's earlier background was her basketball, so she grew up playing basketball. She played for the Sydney Flames, and got to that really high level with her basketball. And I noticed it straight away. I said in a session, "Man, you got great hands. Where'd that come from?" And of course, she said basketball, and it sort of just confirmed to me again why basketball, the crossover, the skill, dribbling, the deception is so good for rugby players as well, and why I'm such an avid basketball fan of the skill development. Today's episode is brought to you by the Recovery Lab. Now, Chloe does head along to these guys. Such an amazing setup over here in Melbourne, over in St Kilda, in a place called Windsor. They've set up a place that is just your full one-stop shop for recovery. The way Chloe uses it is she heads in there and she's able to use the compression boots, the ice baths. They've got an infrared sauna, osteos, massage, nutritionists, podiatry. Anyone playing footy or a sport where you're running around all the time knows how important your feet are, so to stay on top of that. So these guys have set up a recovery lab where you can go in there and just use all the facilities, the trigger point guns, and have it all there. And I think that's what I probably really like about this model and this setup, is that when you actually turn up to this environment, you're there for one reason, and it's to tick the big box of recovery and to do it well and nail it. And so when Chloe goes there, she chucks the boots on or whatever recovery she's doing. She actually watches her videos and has a look at trainings and watches the Sevens girls training while she's with the footy side, just to really stay on top of things. So if you head to their website, which is recoverylab.com.au, you'll actually get 50% off your first session. The first time you go there, you'll be able to check it out and see, wow, this place is a spaceship for recovery and got everything you need. Also, if you want to check them out on Instagram, which is probably my Google search for most things these days, it's recovery_lab_official, and you'll see them. They'll pop up straight away. little green logo, and you'll be able to just check out some of the athletes, how it works. Such a good insight, just searching on Instagram, where you can have a look through and see the recovery lab. So anyone in Melbourne listening, footy players, any sport, rugby sevens, check out the Recovery Lab official on Instagram. Check them out on the website. You'll get 50% off your first session. I know it's been massive for Chloe, and such an amazing professional environment to go tick that box, which is so important when you're trying to work at this high level and get through the amount of skill you want. Chloe finished this podcast today with one of her favourite sayings at the moment, which is train hard, sleep hard, which is a really cool way to look at recovery and know how important that it is. So that's the Recovery Lab. Guys, enjoy this podcast. Anyone who's listening, the last thing that we touch on in this podcast is a little bit about gender equality, and Chloe's big on that and spreading the message and helping the women's game move forward, whatever sport it is, and really giving young players and young up-and-coming girls opportunities to be ready and take that professional opportunity. Enjoy the show. Chloe Dalton, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Bit of background, we just got through a skill session. We got through some tackle stuff, some passing stuff. What else did we do?
Bit of body work on the
body
drop
work.
kicking.
What was your favourite part of the session?
I think passing, had a couple of the Rebels girls come down and do a bit of passing. So you and I have been doing a bit of one-on-one, but good to have a halfback throw me the footy and practice doing a bit of that.
Yeah, you're picking up pretty quick, eh? Because we've done about 6 sessions now. Sorry, 6 sessions now. And things are coming along nicely. How are you finding developing like your passing game, and we're eventually going to get into some kicking?
Yeah.
How are you finding it?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I was pretty nervous, I think, starting out that I'd get back into rugby because I've had about 2 years off where I've been playing a bit of AFL. So I think coming back into it, I was pretty nervous that I'd be a long way off the standard that I was before when I was playing sevens. Not that I was ever world-class passer, that was my hope, but I think it's probably come back more easily than what I would have expected, and I think definitely doing the one-on-one coaching makes a massive difference because it's just a lot of the stuff you do is so technical and there's so much focus on making each rep a good rep. So I think I'm happy with how we're progressing so far.
And I want to ask, you got the pretty big rap from your coach John for sevens with your drop kicking. Where did that come from? Because you got the basketball background, and then he spoke really highly about your drop kicking. So how did that come about? Where did that come from?
I used to muck around kicking the footy. I grew up watching both my brothers play rugby down at Rat Park back in Sydney. And I'd kind of, at halftime of my brother playing Colts or grade, I'd run out. And normally it was off a tee. I didn't do too much drop kicking, but normally off a tee, I'd have a bit of a kick, like try and be a hero, kick it from the sideline.
We've got Rugby Bricks kicking tees, obviously. What ugly tee were you using?
Oh, it was probably a ghetto, like saw the top off, like one of the normal clones. No Rugby Bricks standard there. But yeah, so I used to do that mucking around. And then it was actually when I was in my debut tournament playing up in Noosa, debut tournament for Australia, and we were doing a bit of a training session. At the end of the training session, I remember a couple of the girls, Kobe Jane Morgan, Cheech Barker, a couple of the girls were kicking the footy, and I just had a bit of a drop kick, and Walshy, who was the coach at the time, said to me, he's like, oh, you're not bad at that. And then the next day I ended up kicking against Tonga and Samoa and all these different teams, and it kind of just went from there.
So this is your first hit out for Australia?
Yeah.
And then they say, right, you're kicking the next day?
Yeah, and in that tournament we played New Zealand in the final, and I think I ended up kicking restarts and conversions against New Zealand in the final. I'd never even done it before in my life, so it was a pretty steep learning curve, but it ended up working out.
How did you go?
I'll have to look back on it, to be honest, but I think I did okay.
You must have to get the job the next weekend. That's awesome, crazy. And you probably didn't overthink things as well. You're just like, well, it doesn't really matter how this goes. I'm just gonna kick it. Yeah,
and I think that was the big thing with my drop kicking. It was kind of a natural thing, not something that I learned from scratch coming across. It was kind of always something that I just did, and obviously took feedback along the way and altered it a little bit, but most of the time was a pretty natural kind of routine that I did, and I think that probably worked in my favour in those early days especially.
Unreal. I want to get into your basketball background, and you played for the Sydney Uni Flames, and already when we've been doing our skill sessions, I've said to you about the fourth session, I was like, man, you've got great hands, where did that come from? And then you mentioned about your basketball background, and for me, my followers know how much love that I've got for basketball, the skill acquisition that you get from it. So talk me through sort of your upbringing and maybe how that's now related to footy and sevens.
Yeah, so played a whole range of sports when I was a kid, and I think I was down actually at Nippers at my local beach, and the Dalton family, who are a pretty big name in Australian basketball, not related to me, but there's Brad Dalton, who played for Australia for many years, and his sister Karen Dalton. So Brad was down at the beach with his family doing Nippers, and he kind of saw me. He's like, you should come and play a bit of basketball. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come give it a crack. I was probably 10, 11 at the time.
Were you a tall kid? Because you're a tall person now.
Yeah. I was a bit taller than average, I reckon. You probably saw that. I'm pretty lanky, so probably saw a bit of basketball potential in me. And then, went from there, kind of worked my way up, played reps at Manly Warringah, and then was part of the New South Wales Institute of Sport, and then got the chance to play with the Flames. Yep. As I said to you when we were having a bit of a catch, spent a lot of time sitting on the bench, but still got a fair bit out of it. And I think there was pretty big lessons that I learned from that in itself anyway.
What did your skill stuff look like with there's always basketball camps, there's always people dribbling skills. Did you get amongst all that? Yeah,
I was always pretty big on that stuff. I think basketball was something for me that didn't necessarily come very easily. Like in terms of my shooting technique and things like that, it was something that I worked really hard at. Like say comparing to my drop kicking, it was really natural for me and kind of just flowed. Whereas I think with basketball, it was always something that I had to put in a lot more hours in order to get to the point where some of the girls who were playing at, say, that slightly higher level were at.
Yeah, love it. And I can already see it already when we're doing our sessions, like you're keen to learn how to do things better and execute the skill better, your passing stuff, and actually understanding the detail. Some highlights with your basketball? Apart from just sitting on the bench with the Flames?
I reckon a couple of the national tournaments were probably the highlights. Playing with the New South Wales girls, I think they were probably my favourite parts of it. Just a really good bunch of girls. I remember there was one tournament. It was in the semi-final. I think we were playing against South Australia, and I went up. I kind of went up to get a massive rebound, and this girl brought the ball down and ripped it down, elbow straight to the middle of my head, split my head, blood everywhere, but looked like an avatar with my huge hands. Ended up going out that night, and it was a good time.
How good.
Yeah.
What was your game? I just want to stay on basketball a little bit longer. What was your thing? Were you a dribbler, shooter?
I reckon a jump shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon that was my main thing.
Did you have a 3 game?
That was something that I had to put a fair bit of work into. I reckon my mid-range jumper was probably stronger than my 3. Let's go with that.
Yeah, love it. And then fast forward now, we're into a bit of AFL. So that's footy, what they call it over here, especially in Melbourne. The town's crazy with footy. You got signed as a rookie. So what does that mean, getting signed as a rookie?
So each of the AFL teams usually have 3 spots. So they can have a rookie based on age. I think it's under 21. And then you can also have a rookie that's come from another sport and hasn't played footy before. So I was considered one of the rookies that obviously came from a different sport. So Carlton flew me down and had a bit of a kick of the footy, and then they said, we'd love for you to get involved. Come on down to Melbourne. So I was living in Sydney at that point. Come on down to Melbourne and play the VFL season. So the level below AFLW, play a season there, and then if all goes well, then hopefully you can get listed as a rookie.
Did you literally have a kick of the footy? Was that kind of like your interview?
Yeah, pretty much. That was the job interview, come out here and have a kick of the footy. And I thought because of my drop kicking that I was doing all right, and they kind of looked at my technique and they weren't overly impressed. So
what was some of it? Did they say some stuff? What was
I think the main thing is with the drop kick, you're obviously kicking off the inside of your foot and coming around the corner.
Yep.
Whereas everything in AFL is very square. Your ball drop's very square. Your leg kind of goes straight back and straight through the footy.
Yeah.
And even now, that's something I work on when I'm playing AFL. Is by habit, I'll probably just revert to turning my foot out because for me, that's the more natural thing to do, to kick off the inside of the boot. But it's when you see the AFL players do it well, the technique of their kicking is
so tight and
exceptional.
accurate.
Yeah.
When you watch a good dry game of AFL footy, it's pretty cool and skillful.
Yeah.
And I love watching some of the trainings too. Some of the drills they do is basically crossfield kicks all day. And
it's
awesome,
cool.
Eh?
Yeah.
So your first experience as a rookie with AFL, how did you find it? Obviously, you don't just pass it like a rugby ball. You've got to do the little handoff. And then that's all good when you're off your right, but then you go, I've got to do this off the left.
Yeah.
How did you adjust?
It was actually really challenging. So I think when I started playing rugby, because it had been a game that I'd grown up watching and I understood the game, I just had to learn the skills and then implement them into the game. Whereas AFL for me, growing up in Sydney, it wasn't a big thing back there. It's probably developing more so now with the Swans and GWS, but I think when I got into that, I had to learn the rules of the game, I had to learn how the game worked, I had to learn where to be and when, and then had to learn the skills on top of that. So it was a fair bit all at once. So it was pretty overwhelming, I think, at the beginning. But I just tried to immerse myself in as much of it as I possibly could, whether that was like extra sessions with coaches, listening to podcasts about it, reading newspaper articles about footy players, like just trying to learn as much of it as I could, obviously watching a fair bit of footage and watching games on TV and all that kind of stuff. And it definitely helped having the season in VFL. For more of that development time before I got to that AFLW level.
So you sort of felt like you could shine, because I watched a little bit of your highlights and stuff, like you looked to be doing all the right stuff and getting good marks. And how did you find the first couple of games? Maybe
that was because it was just my highlights, really.
yeah, true.
It was definitely, I think more towards the end of the season, I definitely was feeling more comfortable out there and more confident in what I was doing. But yeah, I reckon my first couple of games, we had a big game against North Melbourne and we got pumped in my very first AFLW game. And I would just remember at the end of the game, I was like, that was not good. As a team, we weren't great, but individually, I just felt like I was pretty out of my depth. But yeah, I guess throughout the season, put in a fair bit of work, and then we ended up making the grand final against Adelaide. And I guess throughout the season, I really felt like I kind of belonged out there a little bit better than what I did at the beginning.
Cool. Well, it looked good on the highlights. Really.
Cheers.
So you had that rookie season, and I remember you saying when we first met that you're really enjoying being a professional now. So what's changed? Has there been obviously a change in contract from going from a rookie to a full squad player now? What have been some of the differences? Like, what does professional look like for you?
Yeah, so because I'm now going part-time with AFLW and part-time with the Sevens, it means that I can be focused full-time as an athlete. And I think the biggest thing for me is that it now allows me the time to completely invest in myself as an athlete. Yeah. Prior to that, when I was working as a physio, and then I'd rock up to AFLW training off the back of a full day of work, you still get in and get the job done, but I think the standard that you do it is pretty different to how you can do it if you're able to come in. So now I'll get in a few hours early, sit down with one of the coaches and watch footage of my training from the previous session, go out, have a few kicks, see the physio, do my mobility, do all my gym work before we even start doing stuff as a team.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's the biggest difference, just having the time to invest in getting the very best out of it.
How did you become as professional as what you are? Because you just mentioned there about all the little boxes that you're ticking. Quite often people get a contract and then go into this day where they can be seen as professional, but anything but professional. Where did you learn or see how to be professional?
I think looking back on my sporting career, when I was playing at the Flames, I was 18, 19 and still pretty young, and I'd consider that to be still quite a part-time program. I definitely learned a lot off the older girls there in terms of their habits and what they were doing. But I think it was once I actually got into that full-time Sevens program with the Aussie team that I realised what a massive difference it can have when you set those standards. Just even things like my speed technique. When I first got in there, like I had a couple of mates who told me I ran like a bloody turkey because I was just like all over the shop, and like I'd try really hard, but like my head would be going everywhere and I was just all over the shop. But realising things like if you invest time in the gym with your strength and your power, and then doing your running technique and doing it as a consistent skill over and over, week in, week out, how much you can then improve in little things like that and how much of a difference that makes to your game.
Yeah.
I think I kind of had a bit of a light switch moment. Not like before that I was hanging around not doing much, but I think that was a big moment where I realised how much of a difference that stuff could make.
I'm sure there's a few girls listening that are running around like turkeys as well. And they're interested to know how you changed your running technique. What did you do? How did you not look like a turkey anymore?
I couldn't boil it down to one thing. I think the gym work, the strength stuff was really big for me, but it's probably more technical, I'd say. So working with the strength and conditioning coaches in hitting the right position. So it's like a lot of the time it's really basic drilling getting yourself into that good position. I think they call it like the triple extension. So you got extension at your knee and your hip and your leg, and in that good upright running posture, and being able to maintain that position under load and under fatigue, and then to be able to replicate that when you're out on the field having a run.
Yeah, right. Because obviously with sevens, you guys are running fast, and footy now as well for a long period of time. So technique is going to get you through as well. Way more efficient. Means you're not using as much energy as well.
Yes.
So you mentioned about your physiotherapy. So you've obviously studied and got the qualification there. So can you remember a time where you just put your head down and actually just crazy put in a lot of hours, like real hard work? Can you look back at a time, I guess, where you just decided that I'm just going to outwork everyone, I've got to do this physio stuff, I've got to study and turn up, tick my boxes at training? Was there a time you were doing that?
Yeah, I reckon the first thing that comes to mind was my last 2 placements. So part of the physio degree, you've got to do 25 weeks of full-time placement in 5-week blocks.
Unpaid usually too.
Yes, unpaid. So my last 2 placements, so 10 weeks all up, I was still part of the Sevens program full-time and asked for permission to take time off Sevens so that I could go and finish my degree. So I'd be working in the hospital from say 8 a.m. till 5. So I was getting up probably 5 in the morning, heading in to do my gym, running, conditioning, kicking, skill work, tackle before placement, and then go into the hospital, work those 8-hour days, come back and do my running session in the afternoon, and then get up and do it again the next day.
Wow. I love that you were doing your skill work as well in the morning. I reckon so many people see the morning as just a gym session, just a conditioning session. But what did some of those mornings look like? What sport were you focusing on then?
That was rugby. That was Sevens at the time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I'm not good at mornings, so I was a bit of a shocker. But yeah, so I'd head in and do the gym, and then so drop kicking was a big part of those morning sessions, making sure I got my kicks in, and then.
Were you on the field, or were you in that green room at Rugby Australia?
No, we weren't there at that time, so we were still down at the Academy of Sport in Narrabeen. So out in the field doing drop kicks, and then hopefully get one of the girls along to practice my passing and some tackle tech.
Outstanding. And that was on the back of your gym work as well?
Yeah.
Awesome. Like, that's just such a great message, because you mentioned there you did an 8 to 5 working day. You're doing your gym and conditioning plus skill work in the morning, all those boxes ticked, and then an afternoon session as well?
Yeah.
So you mentioned about your running session. What was that?
That would have been just the conditioning session from the S&C coach.
So I want to go into now your very first game of Sevens. So you decided that you wanted to play. How did it go? Who got you involved in it? And how did you get on with things like tackling, passing, and the works?
So when I decided that I was going to take a bit of a break from basketball and have a look at playing rugby, I called up a guy called Peter Hammond, who was the coach at my local club at Warringah Rats, and he at the time was actually coaching the New South Wales Sevens team.
Perfect.
And so I gave him a call, and he was like, yeah, come on down to training with the New South Wales girls. I was like, no, like I've never played before. Like I can't just rock up to the New South Wales training. He's like, no, come on down. We'll teach you a little bit. You can have a bit of a run, see how you go. So I went down there, and one of the coaches, a guy called Nathan McMahon, was kind of showing me a few things, translating it into basketball terms, which helped me out. I was like, yeah, okay, I think I can do this. But from there, then ended up playing a season of 15s with...
Can you remember any of the basketball term crossovers? I'm just interested.
Jeez. You're going to test me.
There might be a bit of that sideways defense stuff, was it?
Yeah, it was. I reckon the D part of it was probably, yeah, I couldn't even tell you.
That's all right, carry on, sorry.
Too long ago. Too many sports since then.
Yeah.
So I then played a season of 15s with Warringah Rats.
Yeah.
And
position?
Started at fullback, bit on the wing, and then bit at outside centre.
Yeah.
And then got selected in the New South Wales team a few months later to play at the Nationals.
Sevens or 15s?
Sevens.
Cool.
And then the Australian coaches were there scouting that tournament, and got invited to come and trial with the Aussie team and come to a bit of a camp that they had going on. I don't know how though, because I was playing on the wing for New South Wales, and players like Emily Cherry and Charlotte Caslick playing for Queensland were running circles around me. But I ended up going to a couple of camps, and we played a few games against Japan. Wow. And after a couple of those camps, I was then invited to train full-time with the Aussie Sevens program.
How did you go, that's awesome. How did you go mentally? Like, you coming in there, you must have felt so out of your depth. So did some of the girls help you out straight away? Did you link up with some of them to then give them their knowledge?
Yeah, I think it was really tough. I even remember like my very first time walking in there, I was so overwhelmed and meeting all the girls that were in there, and it was such a professional program at that point because it had recently been centralised. And I knew a few of the girls through Warringah Rats, so girls like Kobe Jane Morgan and Cheech Barker, who I mentioned earlier, and they were awesome, kind of took me under their wing and taught me a bit about what was going on, and I think that made a massive difference for me and my development.
I think with Sevens too, it's not a simpler game, but you can be given a simpler task as a player, especially when you're playing on the wing and stuff. Like the rucks are a lot simpler picture, and there's not as many bodies flying around as the 15s game, so it is such a good place to start for people crossing over. And I guess you must have had these same feelings then when you went to footy.
Yes, yes, probably even more magnified when I went to footy because I just had so much to learn in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the differences between, so you're in this footy environment, what's the difference? Because I want to talk to you about this whole gold medal thing that you got with the Aussie Sevens. Culturally, training-wise, the environment, what's kind of one of the main differences between what's happening in your footy club, Carlton, and then Aussie Sevens?
I think it's probably still that comparison between the full-time, part-time thing. So you'll get to training on a Monday or Wednesday with the Carlton girls, and a lot of the girls will have worked a full day, whether that's in corporate world, as a teacher, as a physio, whatever girls are doing, rocking up after a full day work, getting changed, so then get in and do their gym and train with the team. Whereas when you're in that sevens environment, you're just consumed with rugby and your whole life is about putting into that sevens program. But I think it's given me a pretty cool perspective looking back on it, because at the time, sevens is hard work. Like the conditioning that you have to do, like it's an intense game, particularly at that level when you're playing at the World Series level and Olympics level. It's a lot of hard work. So I think when you're in that situation, a lot of the time it's waking up and it's a hard slog. It's like, here we go again, got a big tackling session today. Not necessarily a lot of the time like waking up being like, can't wait to get smashed today. Like it's hard work, but the reward that you get from it is amazing, and that's why you do it. But I think when I was started working here as a physio and was doing AFLW at the same time, I had so much more appreciation for having the ability to be a full-time athlete. Yeah. Because it was one of those things at the time you probably take for granted.
100%,
yeah, so it's, I guess, pretty nice to have that perspective doing my physio work to realise how good you have it as a full-time athlete.
Yeah, and it's so good that you've got that perspective now to know what it's like when you do just have to scramble in the car, flying around, getting all your clothes organised as well. Washing's a nightmare when you can't be professional as well. So it's cool to hear. The gold medal. So you won a gold medal. Where do you keep it?
I need to save the spot. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Anna Mears, the cyclist, and she was talking, I think her medal, she keeps it in a safety deposit box in the bank.
Right.
And mine's just in my cupboard. So probably should sort that one out.
That's cool. That's what it means rather than what it is, I suppose, a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So when a team, or especially when a team gets together and has a plan to win a gold medal, it's so much harder than even an individual. When you're an individual, you can control everything you do, whatever output you do, whatever work you do is all on you. So I want to understand how you guys planned it, and probably even if you go back sort of 12, 24 months, like, was it talked about a lot? Did you not talk about it at all? So when did kind of the Olympics gold medal plan start?
I think leading into Rio, it was multiple years before the actual event. A big part of what the Australian rugby program did was that they went to other sports. A lot of the girls were touch football players, and a lot of the girls received letters in the mail to kind of recruit them across to the Sevens program, because there was a lot of funding and a big push to try and, I guess, introduce that professional program with the aim of winning a gold medal in Rio. But as a team, once that had all been finalised, I guess, and they kind of had the squad that was heading towards Rio, it was a big part of our team culture and our language, and it was often talked about that we were going there to win a gold medal.
So it was often talked about?
Yeah. That was a really big part of everything that we did. And at the end of a training session, we had kind of a cup of sand each day that we'd transfer from bucket to bucket, and you'd decide whether we'd trained up to gold medal standard for the day, whether we could put that cup of sand in and fill the bucket. So there was a few different things that we kind of had developed as a team with the coaching staff and things like that, and a lot of it was all just that number one focus.
That must have brought a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it did, and particularly heading into Rio, because we'd won the World Series that year, and there was a lot of talk about us going in as the favourites. And I think obviously the Olympics are so massive in globally, but for Australia there's so much attention on the Olympics and looking at the pressure that's put on the swimmers and all these different athletes. But I think the fact that we were heading in as favourites was a fair bit of pressure. But rather than shying away from that, I think we chose as a team to embrace that, because it was something that we weren't going to change the language and our goal just based on the pressure that came from the outside. We kind of just decided to roll with it, and that was our number one reason. We weren't going there just to medal or just to compete. We were going there and we were going to win a gold medal.
It's pretty cool. Obviously being from New Zealand, the All Blacks talked about when they were having cracks at World Cup, like actually walking towards the challenge, which is kind of like, sounds like what you're saying. Identify, this is why we're going. This is, we're going to talk about it and own it. I want to go back to the sand thing. So can you tell me more about like how that worked? Yeah,
so there was 2 buckets. Testing my memory here. 2 buckets. One was full of sand at the beginning, and the other one was empty. And there was a certain point that we had to reach, and we had set for the day.
Yep.
By the end of that block of time, which was just pre-Rio.
Yeah.
We had to reach this point on the bucket based on number of scoops of sand that you would put into that bucket.
Awesome.
And if we got to that line, it was like, we've done all we possibly can in terms of preparation to get ourselves to that gold medal. So there was certain criteria for each day that we'd have to fulfill, and it would be, I think one person was nominated each day, and they'd kind of get up at the front at the end of the video analysis session and say whether or not they thought we deserved the scoop for that day.
Awesome. Can you remember doing it?
Yeah.
And what'd you say?
I said, we did it today. No, I couldn't tell you exactly what I said, but I remember, we were pretty strict on it. So there were definitely days when it wasn't good enough and we didn't get a scoop.
Right.
But I reckon a large proportion of the time we got the job done.
With most teams, there's leadership groups and leadership people. Was there anyone that was quite crucial to that belief and that drive behind the work ethic of the girls and what you guys looked like, sound like, trained like?
I think a big voice in that area was definitely Alicia Quirk. She's kind of the taskmaster. She's got a good footy head on her shoulders and drives really high standards, both from herself and from the teammates. And then in terms of the leadership role, the 2 captains, Shani Williams and Shannon Parry, I think both complement each other quite nicely. Shani, probably not as outspoken, but kind of gets in there and gets the job done, will be one making big tackles and getting big turnovers in the big moments. And then Shano's probably one that'll get the work done, but at the same time is able to pump the team up through what she says and building the culture in that sense as well.
Can you sort of remember a turning point or even getting closer to heading away to the Olympics where there was like a big training or a tournament even that you girls all got belief from? You're like, we're up for this, we can do this?
I reckon qualifying for Rio was a really big moment. We had 2 tournaments over in London and Amsterdam, and we actually ended up winning in London, which put us in a really good spot to qualify. I think in Amsterdam we lost in the final to Canada, but I think the combination of those 2 tournaments and I guess the relief of actually having that qualification finalised was a really big deal for us at the end of that World Series tournament before we had a bit of a break. And then from there, I think it just meant we could come back into training and that box was ticked. So it was coming back. It's like, we know we're qualified. Now all we've got to do is put in the work for when we actually get there.
Yeah. Was there any, from the coaching group, anyone that you thought that was a pretty big piece of the puzzle with because obviously and my experience now with the Wallaroos, it's when you're trying to get a lot of personalities and heaps of talent all going in the one direction, sometimes people like to go off and distract and do other things. Was there anyone in the coaching group that you thought was awesome?
I'm a big Craig Twentyman fan. He was our strength and conditioning coach who was pretty well involved. And I guess in the Sevens program, there's not a huge list of staff. We had head coach Tim Walsh, and then we had Scott Bowen, who was in a management role, but would also help out kind of in an assistant coach role, who obviously has a wealth of experience from his playing career and then into coaching. But Craig Twentyman was just awesome at just getting around the girls, getting the girls pumped up, even if we had like a really hard slog of a session using like the prowlers and conditioning and a big contact conditioning session. I think he played a pretty massive role in just getting the girls pumped up while having a bit of a laugh. And then John Manenti, current Sevens coach, was also involved in a set piece capacity as well. And yeah, I've got a lot of respect for Big Mitts. Yeah. He's a great bloke, but I think he just has a really good balance between being able to get the girls pumped up, but also again being able to have a laugh when it's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get that balance right. The sessions themselves, you said already that there's some pretty grueling sessions. I'm interested to know more about what those. You always hear these damn strength and conditioning coaches talk about high run speed meters, purely from an injury perspective. What does a session look like? So you've got a really hard contact session plus running session.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I reckon the contact conditioning was probably what I found the hardest, and I know a lot of the girls probably felt the same because it was that high reps of whether it's like get ups, like getting off the ground, hitting the pads, doing that the whole way down the field, and then again coming back doing exactly the same thing, like hit the bag down up all the way down the field, then combining that with the sleds like the prowlers, having to push those along the ground. They're the death of me, those things. I haven't missed those. And then I guess a lot of the time I was then integrating that with the skills with probably like a 5x5 meter, just a live, like 5-on-5 tackle kind of, just everyone go for it. Pretty high intensity in that short space. So it's just that really, you're obviously fatigued from that other stuff, and then you just got to go hard, full on contact, and then probably after that have a bit of a run too. Yeah.
And you've mentioned before about Elliot Green, and she's obviously a bit of a beast at training. Most people have got a story. Have you got one about her?
We were doing a tackle drill, like just getting your technique right. As the ball carrier, you had to run it straight, like you couldn't change your line or anything. And she just picked me up, like carried me about 7 meters and dropped me on top of the water bottles that were like 5 meters outside the drill. And I was like, she had me up in there, and I'm like whacking her back. I'm like, yeah, G, yep, good, put me down now. She just dropped me down there. Bam. But yeah, no, she goes hard, G. She's a legend, but she can bring the heat.
But that's what you girls had. Like I watched the game last night in preparation for this podcast, and like New Zealand was stacked. Like they had their best squad. Like looking at their players, I know quite a few of them, and they were a full strength team. And when you mentioned a story like that, like you guys were obviously training at this really high intensity. A lot of people say that they train. Every team around the world, or we train hard, we work hard, we do all this, but you guys were actually at a whole nother level. Do you think a moment like that, getting dumped on water bottles, was really positive? Because now all of a sudden we're at this crazy high intensity, like we're on here, girls.
Yeah, at the time probably didn't think so, but looking back on things like that, I think that was a really big part of it. And even looking at some of the drills that we were doing in preparation, like one of the drills they called worst case scenario, and I think they looked at they looked at the time based on the Seven circuit around how long we could be defending for, and they would replicate drills off that so that we were at the point where you'd have to be able to defend for that long and make tackles and get off the ground and continue running for what could be the longest possible time in a Sevens match that could happen for.
Can you remember, are we talking like minute, 2 minute?
I reckon about maybe 2 minutes, 2.5.
Just going on
Just
D.
going, yeah.
Wow. That's so cool. Any crossover with the boys?
We had a little bit actually. We ended up doing a fair bit with the boys, not contact based, but we do a lot of like 7v5, 7v4 kind of defensive drills. And I think over time we actually ended up giving them a pretty good run.
Yeah.
I don't know if the boys would like to think so, but I think once we got to a point in terms of our skills and passing, and with a lot of the touch football girls, they're passing like exceptional, like Charlotte, Caslick, Alicia Quirk, Emily Cherry, those girls, the way they can throw a footy is pretty world class. So I think that made a big difference playing against the boys. And obviously they're stronger and faster and more agile from that biological perspective. But I think it helped us massively having to come up against an opposition like that.
Yeah, and it sounded like the squad, just going back to it, was so tight. And I've spoken to a few people, and it was almost as if you guys really protected the group that you had. Like, it was quite a hard group to penetrate for other girls trying to make it in, because it's like, we're all on this path, we're all bought into this. Did you guys know you were doing that a little bit? Like making it hard for people to get in?
I don't think that would be like...
Or people not cutting it?
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be like an intentional to keep the 12 the same, but I think just the way that we performed, particularly in the World Series leading up to Rio, probably really cemented that group. Cool. And I think, just once we actually started to glue, and it obviously makes such a big difference when you've got a consistent group that's out there, even with the starting 7 and then the girls that come off the bench. When, say, if Elia's coming off the bench or if she's starting and she's got that explosive power, and you're wrecked coming just up to half time, but you've got Elia sitting out there on the wing and you're like, we're on here. So just like knowing different combinations like that, I think made a pretty big difference for us. Yeah,
awesome. So you're going through the tournament, you're at Rio, you're in the tournament. Can you sort of explain how those 2 days went? Because that in itself's crazy too. Like, there's obviously the world circuit of sevens where you can kind of build towards winning, whereas now we've got to go to Olympics and perform 2 days. Well, game 1. How did you approach that?
Yeah, so it was pretty big. When we got into Rio, we went to a camp down south, a place called Portobello, had about a week down there because we thought that being in the village was going to be pretty full on. Right. So I actually went down to a camp. It was beautiful down by the beach, and did a training camp down there, and then came on back to the village, and it actually worked pretty well. We played the very first day of the Olympics, so we missed the opening ceremony the night before, and then came to game day ready to play. And we were usually it's over 2 days, but we were over 3 days for the Olympics. So 2 games a day. And coming into it, we were just on. Until the third pool game against USA, and we actually were down 12-10 at the siren. We scored a try after the siren, and I had to kick a conversion to tie the game. And I think Walsh said to Craig Twentyman, who was running the water, he said to him, "Go and tell her, pretend it's for the gold medal."
Right.
And I was like I needed any more pressure. But ended up kicking it, which was all right. So I think we drew then with USA, and we still managed to top our pool heading into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have wanted that type of message.
Yeah, probably didn't need it at that point in time. Had enough pressure on me as it was, but it worked.
So you went through, did you play quarterfinal, or was it straight to...
Played quarterfinal, yeah.
Who'd you play?
Oh, whoa.
Who'd you play in your semi-final?
Semi-final, Canada. Did we play Fiji in the quarter? Semi against Canada. Yeah.
Cool. So Canada went to script as well?
Yeah, so we battled it out with Canada as we always did in the World Series. I think we'd come up against them a few times, and they had some really, really talented players as well, like Jen Kish, Ghislaine Landry, a few of those girls, really good footy players. So I think for us, we always knew that was going to be a challenge, and pretty competitive with the restarts as well. That was kind of where we always went head to head with those girls. But yeah, all went relatively to plan against Canada, and then we're through to that gold medal match. Yeah,
so we've spoken about this a bit, and even Ben Ryan talks about with his Fiji boys, how they won, how he could almost tell in the warm-up just the feel of the group, the smiles, the happiness. You mentioned it as well, that there was a little bit of that feeling as well with your girls, like just, this is where we are supposed to be.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We did our warm-up, and then we went into the sheds and put jerseys on and things like that. And then there was actually an injury in the bronze medal match, so we were delayed for quite a few minutes. And we were in the sheds, and I just remember someone just blasting the speaker, and we had a song that was kind of our song for that tournament, and people were just like whacking lockers. Everyone was kind of like yelling along to it, and it was just like everyone was so upbeat, and I probably would have expected us to be pretty quiet, pretty somber, like everyone feeling nervous, but everyone was just up and about. And then when we eventually got out there to sing the anthems, I think what a few people recognised, I read it in a couple of things in the media and things like that afterwards, was just the comparison between the two during the anthems. Like we were looking pretty relaxed and obviously very nervous heading into that game, but just the way that our body language was showing was we were just looking, I think, quietly confident.
Awesome. And they scored first.
Yeah.
So what was said? Was anything said, or did you guys just say, no, this is all right, it's part of the plan?
Yeah, it's so interesting in sevens because it's not like 15s where you come together like in the dead ball area and have a bit of a chat and that kind of thing. Like it's so quick. It's kind of like, quickly come together while they're kicking the conversion and then set up again for the restart. So it's kind of like a few words like, all right, let's go, sort it out, let's go. And what I realize is looking back on it, like I didn't actually remember any of that gold medal match. Like there was so much adrenaline and I just didn't even remember being out there until I watched the game a couple months later and I was like, oh yeah, forgot about that happening.
Yeah, crazy. And then you guys scored a couple of tries, the final whistle goes and you've won it. How was that kind of next hour on the field? Who did you go see? Who was your family there? Yeah,
so I had my family there, my cousins, my auntie and uncle, and a couple of really close friends were there, and we got lifted up into the stands, and it was amazing. Like it was so cool to have that group of people there. I've got like this photo from when I was doing cross country when I was like 10 years old, and it was like the same group of people that were there that were all there in Rio. So it was just like, it was a massive moment. There was a lot of tears, but it was a pretty massive moment. And I think the biggest thing that I felt was just relief, because it was something that, like, I was 7 years old when I watched Kathy Freeman win the 400 metres at Sydney Olympics, win a gold medal, and that's when I decided that I wanted to win an Olympic gold medal. So it was like this feeling of like, this was like my biggest life goal, and like it was just this feeling of like, whoa, we've done it.
So you decided at 7 years old that you were going to win a gold medal?
Yeah, mum used to do scrapbooking, and she's got it. I've written it down on a piece of paper after one of my cross country events.
Did you know what sport though?
I probably thought
basketball. Well,
that was my goal. I wanted to do it with the opals.
Still time.
Oh, I'm a bit rusty now, I reckon.
That's awesome. Hey, isn't that cool that you can, like, I'm sure it must even be more sweeter now, like having a conversation like that and being able to look back and say, like, you've got it, you've won a gold medal. It's pretty amazing. It must give you a lot of energy to keep striving and keep trying to achieve more, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really cool to be able to tick that one off, but just the feeling like of working for so many years, like even though it wasn't necessarily all these years that I was playing rugby working towards that, I felt like all of the years as an athlete kind of culminated into that one moment of winning that gold medal, which was pretty cool.
I've got this down, like, amazing. I've got this down a bit of detail. So I watched the game last night and I just noticed how you were tackling. And I'm sure people out there wanting to start playing sevens or getting into rugby, you had to learn real quick how to tackle, but not only how to tackle, but how to have confidence to tackle. Where did that come from and what did you do?
My first tackling sessions, I remember being down on the beach with the Warringah Rats girls, just down on one knee on the sand.
The beach, I love it.
Yeah, a bit of beach tackling, can't go wrong. And then, so I probably learnt the technique there, and then after that, what I'd do is I'd get my two brothers, so I've got an older and a younger brother, they're both probably about 6'3", 6'4", and I just remember getting out in the backyard, like put the headgear on, shoulder pads, mouth guard, like got as padded up as I could, and I just got down on one knee and I was like, all right, just run at me. And I just did that over and over, and I remember like I couldn't move my neck for about a week after that. But it's kind of, I guess, having those big boys run at me, it taught me pretty well how to tackle and how to do it properly.
Well done. Like, as we keep chatting, you keep continuing to put yourself in this position where you have to learn. Like, you had to turn up for your first game of sevens, had to turn up to your footy interview. Like, it's awesome to hear. I guess that's where we're going to go now. A little bit about gender equality and stuff like that. You've got a bit of killer instinct in you. And I recently spoke with Rachel Burford from England. You know Rachel?
Yeah.
Plays for England. And she talked about how she has these academy sessions with a group of girls that turn up and they just don't have confidence. But if she was to do the same sessions with a group of boys, she wouldn't be able to shut them up. Like, it'll be running around trying to be the man. So there's almost that, like, go hard but don't shine too bright. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, just a bit of a mindset for people to, especially young girls, to actually attack it and attack what you goal and attack, just like you did, 7 years old, said you're going to get a gold medal. I suppose it's day to day, but have you got any sort of thoughts or advice around that, actually attacking your goal?
I think a really big thing for me was looking back when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was be a professional athlete. And at the time, looking back on it, there wasn't necessarily the pathway to do that. And now I look at the opportunities that I have, and I've probably had like a couple of people along the way that are like, oh, you're switching sports again, here we go. And I'm like, yeah. But a massive part of it for me is that I've had this incredible opportunity to be part of a generation where that's now possible. So I think the biggest thing for me that I love for this next generation of young girls is that they can actually see girls playing for the Wallaroos, girls playing Super W, girls playing AFLW, girls playing for the Matildas, playing cricket, who are either doing it in a semi-professional or a full-time professional program. And I think that's really cool that that's something that if they want to do that they can aspire to that. So I think the fact that they're now, and then from that level filtering down that there's now more pathways in place, I think it's really cool that if the girls want to do it, I just say get involved. Yeah,
and I love that it's the ones like yourself that are getting rewarded, the ones that have actually put in the work. There's a lot of probably still in the males game of people that are there because the sport's so professional. There's people there that haven't actually worked that crazy hard to be there, but with the girls actually getting rewarded at the moment, it's only the girls that have put in a shitload of work and worked their ass off. So that's cool. You also enjoying being the athlete. We spoke about that, like your recovery room and your huddle. Can you just explain a little bit about that with what you're doing with your recovery?
Yeah, so I'm actually after this I'm going to head to a recovery lab. So my coach at Carlton has a recovery lab just down the road, and so I'll get on the recovery boots and in the ice baths, and I've just decided that'll probably be my time. I'll get the huddle up. So I've got to watch my Carlton training, but then I'm also splitting up my days when I do my rugby skills sessions with you. I'll watch the footage of the Sevens girls training, and they'll also be playing in Dubai in the World Series tournament too.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm keen to watch that as well, especially after speaking with you. You're playing two sports, which means you've got two different contracts, which means that one contract isn't enough for you to survive off and be a fully professional. What are these, how do you sort of see that playing out when the one club, the one sport can just look after a girl?
Yeah, I think I would love to get to a point where it can just be full-time. Obviously Sevens is at that point where the girls are doing that in a full-time capacity. I would love for the same thing to happen with AFLW. I think it's quite challenging for the time being. There's a lot of expectation put on whether it's at a Super W level or AFLW level. I think for the standards that are expected from the wider audience and the public in a comparison to, say, a men's game that's been professional for a number of years. Yeah. Able to put in the full-time work in that capacity, and I think there are a lot of the time people compare the two games without necessarily taking into consideration those factors. So I think that being a part of both a full-time and a part-time program, I can tell the differences between the two, and I'd love for it to get to a point where sports across the board have the opportunity, if that's what girls want to do, have the opportunity to do it as a full-time thing and see the progress that can be made in those environments.
And I see the other helpful things coming in. There's a few girls getting the old car sponsorship, a few little perks here and there. Have you got the car lined up yet?
No, I don't have the car. I got the gold medal, couldn't get a car.
Anyone listening, let's get a little Mazda or a Hyundai.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
You're doing some stuff as an ambassador.
Yeah.
And you're also big on, obviously, the equality stuff. So I guess I want to hear some more about what you're doing. I know that you've given a couple of presentations to the Carlton girls, so maybe just a little bit on that.
Yeah, so when I was at the Sevens program, I had the opportunity to be an ambassador for RWatch, which is an organisation that works in the promotion of gender equality for the prevention of domestic violence. And when I was first approached about it, I was a little bit hesitant because it wasn't something that I'd personally been affected by, so I didn't know how much I could speak to it. And obviously it's a it's a really full-on thing to be involved with. So I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do it, that I'd do it in a really respectful way and I guess go the right way about it. And I got to do some really cool training sessions with R-Watch, and I guess the biggest underlying factor was about in domestic violence, there's a lot of different things that people talk about in terms of the involvement of alcohol and whether people have grown up in an abusive family that can be contributing factors, but the real underlying cause is actually that gender inequality and males growing up believing that they're more powerful than women is actually the biggest cause for perpetrators of domestic violence. And I guess the team at R-Watch educated me in the role that I could play as a female athlete in promoting that gender equality. And I guess I just realised in that moment how massive it was that I could hopefully just, by educating a few people, make a bit of a difference in something like that. And then since I've come across to Carlton, I've had the opportunity to be involved with Carlton Respects, which is also Carlton's program that strives to do the same thing that R-Watch does. And so we have a round where we wear orange socks, which is the universal colour for harmony. So both the men's and women's team have a round where we wear orange socks, and then also going into corporate space and into schools and educating the kids about gender equality and that girls and boys are just the same and deserve the same opportunities as one another.
So when you are giving the message, and you said that you've learned a bit and got upskilled a bit, what are some of the things that you like, what's the message that you can deliver? I
think a really big part of it is just around language that people use in everyday conversation, because a lot of the time it'll be different jokes that are thrown out, or like even reading on social media. Like I find it really difficult. A lot of the comments I read on social media, if there's a post about AFLW, you'll get these kind of teenage boys, young boys, saying things like "get back in the kitchen, make me a sandwich," like kind of things like that. And obviously not worth going into an argument with an internet troll, but just, I guess, changing attitudes and just casual conversations, whether it's in workplace or sporting teams or whatever it is, just changing language is a really big one, and just changing perceptions. And then also the role as a female athlete in just being a good role model and like showing both young girls and young boys that females can be professional athletes and they can have those opportunities just same as what the men can.
Yeah, and I'm loving seeing it. Like you watched even the Big Bash at the moment, like those girls are just killing it. They're so professional, they speak professional, they look professional, they are professional, and the game's definitely going there across the different codes. But it's interesting to hear you mention about the years that the game has had to be professional, because I think that's massive, eh? And you're right, if you watch a game of men's footy, AFL versus women's footy, like the years of professionalism is so different, so of course they're going to look different.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And you gave a presentation to the Carlton girls.
So I presented to the Carlton women's and the men's team, and it was actually these guys from an Instagram page that went a bit viral called Yaya Next Door. And so what they do is, it's an old lady, you don't actually see her, but she passes food over the fence to these young guys, and the page kind of went viral because everyone was just loving it because they just get these epic meals cooked up for them. But it ended up coming out that the boys had a pretty massive story to share, and as part of Carlton Respects, I had the chance to interview the boys in front of the playing group.
It's massive.
Yeah, and they shared their story about their personal experience of domestic violence, which was they were so open and honest about it, and it was a really cool opportunity to chat to them and to meet them, but to use that as an education experience for the playing group as well.
So you moving forward, is there stuff that you do on the daily that you touch on the stuff, or is it events and speaking with young girls or young people?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, just the conversations that I'm having with people daily, and then also still being involved with things like Carlton Respects at different events. And then I'm kind of looking into, nothing final yet, but I'm looking into maybe doing a bit more study in that area, because I'd love to kind of transition post-career. I've got my physio work, but I'd love to kind of get down that pathway a little bit if I have the opportunity to do so.
That's so cool. Well done. It sounds like you've already had a pretty positive effect, and we'll definitely link those links up on the show notes for this podcast. Your inspiration, books, podcasts, people, Netflix, YouTube. What do you do when you need a little pick-me-up of inspiration?
I've been loving the Howie Games podcast lately. That's been a really cool one. That was Anna Mears. I listened to her on there. Elise Perry. I'm a big Elise Perry fan. And Joe and Renee Ingalls. Surely you know Joe. Big old Joe Ingalls. They had an awesome podcast on there the other day, and I love listening to that. Love reading books. Love a bit of Netflix. What am I watching at the moment?
What time does the alarm go?
Or I like my sleep.
Cool. That's just part of recovery.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. My S&C coach is saying to me at the moment, because I'm trying to bulk, trying to put on size. Yeah. So I got to eat hard, sleep hard.
Cool. Eat hard. That is such a great line.
Yeah, I
eat
like
hard,
it.
Sleep hard.
Yeah.
Wow. How's that going size wise?
I'm getting there.
You got some shoulders on, yeah?
Do I? Hey, thanks. I've been working on them. So I reckon I was about 71 kilos in Rio. And then I dropped heaps of weight, not by trying. Like I was in the village, like we finished on day 3 of the Olympics, and then I had a couple of weeks, stopped taking my bulk protein shakes and was just eating chicken nuggets because we had free Maccas in the village. Couple of weeks off the gym, and like within 3 weeks or so, I'd lost about 5 kilos. And since then I've kind of maintained that weight. So it was, pretty light playing in the last season of AFLW, but I'm on my way back up to 70 kilos. It's a slow process with this.
So what are you at the moment?
I'm at about 67 and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, cool. I'm getting there.
Wow, amazing. You're a big frame for 67 and a half. I would have thought you were heavier than that, but
yeah, okay.
There you go.
That's good. I'll take that.
Last question. The person who kind of gave you the belief, so they were always in your corner, they had your back, they were able to help as well with what you're trying to chase as well. Who was maybe that one or two people?
I feel like I'll get emotional talking about this one.
That's all
right. I reckon my big brother, Michael, was probably my biggest one. And yeah, I don't know, he's just always been in my corner. Both my brothers actually, like even running at me with the footy or just throwing 1,000 passes out in the backyard.
Cool.
And I think even like I remember sitting down at the dinner table when I kind of made the decision that I was going to give rugby a crack. And I remember Mum was super nervous about it because she was nervous watching my brothers as it was. But Dad was like, the first thing he said, he was like, I think you'd be great at rugby. And then Mum kind of came around too, and within a couple of months she absolutely loved it and was giving me feedback. And yeah, just my family in general have been incredible throughout my whole both sporting career, but whatever I'm doing. So it's been pretty amazing to have their support.
It's great to have the family support. Was there anyone outside the family?
Yeah, I reckon...
Even an old basketball coach or just someone who's just flicked that switch to help you realise you can strive?
I think a big one would be Erin Morton, Bez, from... works at New South Wales Rugby, but she was one of my coaches at Warringah Rats. She actually came across to Rio as well,
cool.
which was really cool. She's just been massive. Again, same thing, just always in my corner when I kind of hit the points of doubt or injury with my arm and things like that. Just always has the right words or the shit jokes to kind of get me back up and going again, which has been massive.
Yeah, so cool. Hey, it's awesome coming out to the hour mark. It's been awesome to chat, and I guess from me, I've been so impressed with your professionalism every time we've had a session. You turn up, just your attitude, your attention to detail, and just, you're always on time and absolutely killing it. So thanks so much for sharing. So cool to hear about Rio. I was really interested to chat with that because I love, obviously into coaching now, trying to drive a team towards something and just hearing how you guys did it. Is there anything you want to wrap up with?
I'm pretty happy with that. I reckon it was cool to chat through some of that stuff. Some of the stuff I haven't actually touched on in a while. So it's pretty, because as I said, because I didn't remember that game, it's actually really nice to actually reminisce and kind of go through some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue to grow your rugby game, and all the best with the Carlton girls.
Thanks heaps.
Nailed it. Thanks for listening, guys. I know you would have enjoyed that episode with Chloe. Such a professional person, as I mentioned. She's always on. She's always ready and really prepared and willing to learn. I really loved hearing how they got to Rio, the culture stuff. I loved that little sand in the bucket story that she told. And did we achieve what we wanted today? And if we did, the sand goes in the bucket. And if we didn't, well, come on, we need to pick up our standards. The story about Ellia Green smashing around the water bottles, how good, and some of that really positive message that she's sharing just around changing the language and changing some of the bad stuff that we're hearing around women in sport and knocking that on the head and really just helping women move forward and creating this really professional environment that is only going to keep continuing to grow, the opportunities to grow, and it's people like Chloe who are really pushing the game forward for the better. So such a great inspiration. So well done, Chloe, on the person you've become and sharing that knowledge. I'm sure our listeners absolutely loved it. Just to finish up again, the Recovery Lab is such a great place to go if you're wanting recovery here in Melbourne. Get in there. Compression, ice baths, infrared saunas, massage, nutritionist, podiatry, and everything you need in the Recovery Lab. Go in there, smash it out, and then go home and chill for the day. Check them out, Recovery Lab Official on Instagram, and also recoverylab.com.au on the website. Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. Until next time.